All right, welcome to the lab, everybody. As you know, my thing as of recently has been to sort of live in the moment with the people around me and to entertain the idea that the presence is always that battle of you're alone, but you're never really alone, because when you're looking at it right, when you think you're alone from all limited perspectives, that's actually when God will be there with you, which means that basically you're aligned with the plot, if there ever was one, in the natural order of things. And I think that I sort of laid out the plot. The plot itself was that you are never really alone when you're alone, or when you are alone, you're never really alone. And it all sort of navigates from this place where we look at loneliness and why it's seen as such a bad thing. And that bad feeling is ultimately just related to the idea of the truth. The truth is like the end, and the end is like the work. And so when we're alone, if we're coming at it from the wrong perspective, we'll think that we're supposed to be somewhere else. We're supposed to be working. We're supposed to be doing something that other people can tell us is true. We're supposed to be finding out just how to end our current situation. But I think that when you're looking at this in the right way, you'll say that being alone doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's just a feeling that most people can associate with loneliness. It's the most commonly accepted bad thing there is, verging on being closely related to the common cold, which they say they'll never be able to get rid of. But I'll tell you the one thing that even trumps the common cold, folks. It's being alone. This idea, when cross-stated to anybody, will automatically give them these ideas of the truth, these things that are uncontrollable. It's a universal thing. It's something that transcends all time and being. And then if we say that there is the work there's truth, there is the end of things, then we sit there for a while and meditate. And meditation allows us to speak in a way in which the words seem to fall out of our mouths like drool when we sleep. And when we're asked if we're awake, our patterns are still the same. People might actually say that our dreams are one and the same. And we come to these ideas by sneaking up behind them, by going around, by standing on our head and looking at them upside down, by throwing things to see what sticks, what feels the best. Is it just you? Or is it your nest? Is the nest an egg? Is the sky the limit? Is the speed of light really there or within it? And after coming to many battles, reading about eons, if a thing could skip, then we daydream and slip between all time, it seems, as we ready ourselves for the most important thing, the moment that bad things contain, and being something like the target, the spot that remains somehow unchanged, like it doesn't move. But funny thing about the moment is it moves. And so we look deeper and we try to stretch as maybe this minuscule point is something that we can catch. And after all our crying, the tears turn to laughter, as it seems as though it's the end. But in the end, is it really a disaster? What then do you have to lose? What pain then is there? What then more do you have to choose? You see, that's how things embrace the end. That's how things, they say, win. Maybe if all time itself is actually chosen, time itself just an experience of this then. And then across the stars, from tip of brush to canvas yards, through the backstage of all the plays, as the weight melts and is formed in clay, as the person studies and tries to reach the limit, but the limit then breaks. Is that not the ultimate? And when the ultimate pierces the veil, what then does the spirit actually tell? Is it a whisper or is it a yell? So sister, so some more. Everybody goes through every class, everybody opens up every door. Everybody knows the same knock. Everybody knows the same song. Everybody knows the same prayers. Everybody knows the same wrongs. Muddled through the immensity of things, it seems like time is only open or it's shrinking. Somehow, some way, if we could be like time, then all we'd be is disappearing, invisible, unseen. That's the truth of time. You see, it's invisibility. But something has to awake. There's no way that something can be gone forever. It's almost as difficult to say as it is for there to be something in the beginning that's clever. You'll have your part to play. And all mesmerizing patterns eventually break until the breaks of all the patterns are just waters for heaven's sakes. And underneath the blanket, as it is wet, if somehow we were something that couldn't, we picked it up and it stretched. When we were the most dry is when we're Mr. Dream, sleeping and feeling like we're sinking and swimming seamlessly through infinity. All forms they change, all things rearrange, all manner of languages actually stay the same, so it's insane, so it's free, because you see, it goes around eternally. And in that way, all the same things eventually just mean chaos, as well as anything that could be unnamed. But, the circle, it can be large or it can be small. And as they say, it's not done until it's done on a certain day. What's the biggest circle we have to our name? And this being the idea truly is the biggest circle we have. And it tells us that we have the ability to manipulate. Manipulate is the ability to make connections, you see, connections from things that frustrate to the ordinary, and then to what is so blissful that perhaps it is like an end, that in that place nothing is then blissfully unaware. But to get there, we first begin with what is bad again. Badness, my friend, loneliness, the kiss of deafness, and darkness too. The kiss that goes all things and through, so it's a whore, and no one wants the kiss to be something that haunts disgustingly, as it wants everything you see. But then what are you? Are you wanting to? Then we're all fallen things, falling through. There's actually no worth to run into. Eternally, things just go on forever. But before they do, again, we said there might be something clever. And cleverness is agile, is swift. It takes alone and says then truth. It says then work. It says then end. And in this we see intention. Intention of all things as they're universally exposed. There's universal law. And this means there's patterns, there's repose. And in all this then, take a guess as to when. We say the one word that trumps them all then. But before that, what else did we miss? We missed the work, which itself is the process, and the idea that we could manipulate and say that perhaps there's God in hate. To say that perhaps from one thing to the next is that idea. It is to prostrate something plain and call it insane, which then at that point in time makes all things the same, makes all shapes go round, makes everything free as sound, makes everything clear. And we have intention there. And we can say in a purposeful way that what is it truly to really be alone? If we're saying that the idea itself is true, then why can't work be for you? Why can't the end be for you too? Like something's over, you win something then. Why can't intention be yours all the same? Which means there's direction and flow of grandiose and encompassing things. Once we hit the idea that there's universal law, can we actually say that God now might have a paw? Which is just to say that there is perhaps a chance for a fight. There's a chance that ultimately all things might be right. And again, it is our skill to manipulate flat and laid out things into a wheel. And we can then say that it's all straight once it's all the same, once it's equal across all planes, once we can see something perfect, but perhaps it only wants us to do more. Then is that the point in which you open or close the door? What then have you lost with itself, with ideas itself, when you think that work goes for there being advantage or something else has the idea? So if you have the idea itself, then all of a sudden you've switched. You've moved things from one shelf to another, from one cabinet, so that it's not so cluttered. You can then see clearly that truly, if you have good ideas, then when all of a sudden loneliness comes, it's freeing, my friend. With all these ideas in your head, what can't you do then? Without anyone in the way, but this way itself, and how much you can say to keep the air clear, to say that there's goodness there, even if all the ground and what's below could say that it was hell. If you could say this, though, then above all the fire, all the burning, there would be no smoke that could choke the air. It'd be like it was straight ozone. You could see an ethereal rainbow there with stars and heavens in the sky. And it would be so that from this way you could fly. So then all these things connect to make circuits. The purpose is power. And the more power you get, the more that you should try to rearrange this circuit's composition and deal with its reiteration, and say that from each plane, though, this can be said. There is no way that this will ever really be dead. And in some way, then maybe death is just like eyesight. When it's really in your way, and if you really are dead, then you just might say there's a better way instead than looking at me and saying that, look at this guy, it's just all in his head. So then, work can actually be the idea that there's patterns we see. Intention is direction, and ends are wings, like wings with wing tips then. And from here, then, we move on to the gym. What then was said once we got here, instead, it was all of a sudden, let's speak of women and marital things. What do women want? Well, resources and safety. Where, though, does that all come from? Perhaps with the argument that we just said, we could say from heaven, then. But then, is that the smartest man to align with these things anyway? To then have the resources that they could play? To then say that there could be resource and safety for a woman anyway? Or is that how wars are started and competitions? Because ultimately, with all these reiterations, some things really are just opinions. But there's even ends to those too as well. It's a matter of exhaustion. And maybe even in hell, you might enjoy the smell. But all that aside, talking about Troy and Agamemnon's bride, Paris, Achilles, Alexander, and Ronaldo. Maybe a little bit of Messi too. But somewhere through all those here, we then say, well, what are we but programs then, if we only live to serve that end? Then maybe all of a sudden those bad ideas have just reversed, because it's like there is no pattern. The pattern's cursed, and that's why it flows both ways in parallel circuits. Because I've studied physics for days. But anyway, that's the idea. And it's about doing it the smart way, with what you thinks about these thoughts. What you think somebody thinks about these thoughts. And what you think something thinks about these thoughts. But then there's the drive, which creates competition and ultimately creates different cultures as things have gone down different roads, which create either more strict or a more relaxed pose in regards to words such as family, you see. But ultimately, it would probably just relate to everything, like I've tried to say anyway. That's why there's basically a lower birth rate, right? Because it's this idea that you must have resources and comfort. But of course, there's always the idea that things go out of order. But was that not just the bad feeling that I stated before, that maybe there's work there? Maybe there's something more? And if you're really anybody that's able to carry their own weight, then you'd deal with it just like it was that universal thing, that bad thing of life anyway. Then perhaps it'd be able to show you a way to say that you could be alone again in some way. But again, I know that not everyone likes to be alone, because some like to say that God is in good company. That's the spirit they'll say, you see. So maybe it is that God is somehow this perfect society. But then, are we royal? Is that the best way anyway, if it goes through pure order? Or will there always, if all things get expressed, be something bad to say at the end of that quest? not that thing will uprise and shout and detest, and take us through all these trials. Then who really is the best but the one that never gives up, the one that always gets through. This I'm saying, it can be you. Because then we have democracy, because we don't trust life, you see. So we say that to mitigate it, we have these votes to frustrate it, and in hopes we can get the best of whatever ways we think we might know. In some blindness, we say that this is our best educated guess. Somehow it's scientific, ironically, but from above, at that point, there's sublime, you see. And can we hit a triple point too? Which is like there's a best person, theoretically too. And in this way, what's chance and choice, they say, all of a sudden, you're thinking, how has this been said? And I'll tell you what, you've just caught a glimpse of my head. But anyways, today we're more like a democratic republic anyway, which is more like Rome than the colonies, which was more like Athens than Brittany, which was monarchy ever truly the right way? Maybe for that 0.1% chance the other way, instead of the enlightened path of the expression of everything, eventually landing on bad luck, the ending. But again, something bad can be related to many things, which again creates the moment, which moves between things. And that's what life is catching and releasing. So, what will the people say to this? If I had to guess, I am the worst, I guess. Guess I am the worst. The real trick is in seeing the switch quick, right? Say that 5 times fast. With somebody giving you the most annoying treat possible. And the best way to sort of see the trick, where it's ultimately just like a light switch, right? This is sort of, in my mind, how you've anglicized, or how I've anglicized, like an infrastructure, of a very advanced culture. But ultimately, that, life flies from tip of wingspan to tip of wingspan, right? And it's the birds that go around the world which ultimately create the halo that protects the earth from the unknown. Bet you've never heard anyone say that before, but it seems like somehow right within what people might, though. That's just how amazing I am. But the real trick is right in saying where alone is a bad thing. Because you tell people I'm alone, automatically it's associated with being bad. And it's probably the most universally associated bad feeling you can have, you know? Almost guarantee anybody that has hands on this planet, you go up to them and hold up one finger, you know? Everybody's gonna know it just means one. Too far or something, you know? And I think it's a matter of being able to open things and split things, though, if you are really able to utilize it in some manner, and being able to understand psychology of man and perhaps the purpose of man, and all these words being just as much as programs of the herds as something microscopic being the devil inside that just tries to get you to have power to take advantage of whatever you want. And that's your only driving force. That's what you're programmed and taught. So now I've just related big and small that way, but yeah, badness is just that there's truth. And I think truth can be a very good sort of pH buffer. If you know what one of those are in chemistry, you have a pH buffer, which allows you to inoculate something with certain levels of something of an opposing sort of pH before it will, and it will indicate how much buffer you have left before it will render the solution either acidic or basic, right? I think truth operates on a scale like that, kind of. And if there's truth there, then basically you can say that there is some way to take advantage. There's some direction. And if you can get the idea, then again, being alone is like being able to have focus. You know, it's like being able to have focus. You can be alone around a lot of people and have focus. You can be alone and not be alone because you have focus, you know? Which is like being aligned with God, you know, depending on what your harmonies are, or things of those orders and magnitudes. But it's ultimately just being able to find out the truth. The real trick is being able to find out the truth in something that's bad, and say that as soon as there's a sense of work there, once you understand truth, then there's work, there's a process. And at that exact point, then basically, I think it means opportunity. And really the trick then, because I've rendered this so mute with words, which words have a way of basically making everything normal anyways, is just, you know, you never know until you try, kind of thing. If we're rendering this to like the ultimate ends of things, to where it is a test, then once you find the place where you believe work is, then you'll never know unless you try. But you better use what you think is your best work, depending on how bad obviously something is, to create the idea that you can align with things in the proper direction to be on God's good side ultimately, right? And you know, you can basically just boil down all philosophy and whatever family topics, government policies, into that one whole overarching kind of thing, because it's basically going to test all those. And if that's functioning like it should, then it's basically going to allow something to, the moment, be transferred through all these places, like Traveler. That is the great Traveler. It's like the moon. All of a sudden the moon has become inert. It's an inert gas, like argon, actually. It allows things to travel to see. It's like the wandering eye that could be. And I'm sure that there's some evil there too, though, because there's no way things don't have a direction. So maybe from some way, if we're on the moon, we actually see the Earth as the traveler, though what actually has life, as the dust of the moon, has seemed to be a bad dream that we can't wake up from, you see. And if I was to say, you know, again, if I render things out to a process, and it's like, you know, if all things are created equal or born equal, then what's the difference? You know, maybe I have just stated that there is no difference between anything. You know, maybe this is like actually seeing One Punch Man just jump up to the moon or whatever. You know, maybe I've destroyed all difference. Maybe that's why it seems like there actually really is no trick. There's no trick to it. You know, it's like my hands are busy and my mouth is there, and so if anybody ever wanted something to be equal, then maybe just start taking measurements of the moon until you've collected enough moon dust, kind of thing, right? But I think then the real trick is picking up speed again. It's coming back to that idea that there's talent, there's power, which ultimately means there's order kind of through difference, which is kind of like chaos a little bit, you know, but it's in knowing sort of our place. And you know, is the truth always bad? I think it's much easier to say it's bad from a much more universal perspective, kind of thing. But there's a tricky way even to say that the truth itself is even bad. You still have the idea that, like, God is good kind of mentality, or that God's with you. Maybe it's somewhere in my rhyme about where I even said that if you make everything the same, it doesn't even matter what's said, you know? It's been quite the oration, though. Pretty good, I'd say. I don't know, maybe I'll start doing weekend thoughts in row. Weekend thoughts in row. Hey, I'm here. I'm right here, dog. I'm gonna be quiet for a minute. Just see what happens, because sometimes stuff does happen when you're just quiet after something like this. Okay, yeah. The trick is that, here's some speed for you, is just in how you say you're not really alone. The idea is that when you are alone, you're not really alone. But when you're alone and the idea isn't the idea of your true self, then you're going to think that work and truth and end are all working against you. But if you have the idea that when you are alone, you're not really alone, that it's not that you have the idea with you, right? And that's sort of the easy way. I sort of explained the process before I explained sort of the topological way to look at it. You know, it's just like when you're alone, you're not really alone because you know how to work. You're alive, aren't you? You know what some true things are. You know what some ends are, you know, which means, you know, that ultimately kind of what you shouldn't do. Then realistically, if you know those things, then it's not that bad to be alone. Because then you can figure out who you are. It's a journey into this exploration of the soul and of the self to get to find that part of you that nobody else can take from you, which is ultimately going to be your immortality. Right on the hour. I am fucking good. There's no doubt about it. I am fucking good.